What happens when a woman who thrives on confrontation sits across from someone who refuses to be intimidated? On The View, a conversation meant to highlight advocacy and resilience quietly turns into a psychological standoff. The hosts try to keep the peace. One guest stays composed. The other keeps pushing. By the end of the hour, only one chair will be empty. And Meghan Markle will walk out while the cameras are still rolling. But the moment it all begins is almost polite. The studio of The View looked exactly as it always did, bright, inviting, carefully designed to feel safe. Warm lighting, familiar faces, the illusion of balance. The audience applauded as Meghan Markle walked onto the set, dressed impeccably, posture straight, smile perfectly measured. She waved once, just enough. Meghan took her seat with the practiced ease of someone used to cameras. Used to attention, used to control. Joy Behar leaned in with a welcoming grin. Whoopi Goldberg nodded respectfully, her expression neutral but attentive. Moments later, Sharon Osbourne entered from the opposite side. The applause shifted. It wasn't louder. It was sharper, curious, expectant. Sharon didn't wave. She didn't perform. She walked directly to her chair, sat down, crossed her legs neatly, and rested her hands in her lap. Calm, observant, grounded dot from the outside. It looked like a balanced panel. Inside the room, the air tightened. Whoopi opened the segment with her usual authority. "We're glad to have all of you here today," she said. "This is a conversation about public life, criticism, and what it means to speak your truth." Meghan smiled wider at that. "Oh, I'm very familiar with criticism," she said lightly. "It tends to follow women who don't behave the way they're expected to." Joy chuckled nervously. "Well, that's certainly true." Sharon said nothing. The first questions were safe. Meghan spoke about her projects, her voice smooth, her answers polished. She talked about empowerment, about boundaries, about reclaiming narrative. Every sentence sounded rehearsed, but delivered with confidence. Sharon listened, no nodding. No reacting, just listening. When it was her turn, Sharon spoke calmly about longevity, about weathering public opinion, about learning when to speak and when not to. Her tone was reasonable, almost gentle. Meghan tilted her head slightly, smiling. "That's very traditional," she said. "Some of us don't have the luxury of staying quiet." The audience murmured. Sharon turned her head toward Meghan for the first time. "I don't think silence is the same as weakness," she said evenly. Meghan laughed softly. "Well, I suppose it depends who's allowed to speak without consequences." Joy leaned forward quickly. "Let's remember, we all have different experiences." "Of course," Meghan interrupted, her tone sweet but sharp. "Some people are protected by their industry. Others are punished for disrupting it." Her eyes flicked briefly toward Sharon. Sharon raised an eyebrow, but remained composed. "Or," she replied calmly, "some people confuse disruption with provocation." The room shifted. Whoopi glanced between them, sensing the edge. "Let's keep this respectful," she said gently. Meghan smiled again. "I'm always respectful. I just don't dilute my truth to make others comfortable." Sharon didn't react immediately. Then she said quietly, "Truth doesn't need volume to be heard." A ripple moved through the audience. Meghan crossed her legs, posture tightening. "That sounds nice," she said. "But for women like me, being soft gets you erased." Sharon leaned back slightly. "And being combative," she replied, "gets you dismissed." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was attentive. Joy cleared her throat. "Okay, let's talk about resilience." But Meghan had already turned fully toward Sharon. "You've had the benefit of saying controversial things without being branded difficult," she said. "That's not something everyone gets." Sharon met her gaze, unflinching. "I've been branded worse than difficult," she said. "I just didn't build my identity around it." That was the first real crack. Meghan's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. The cameras kept rolling. The audience leaned forward. And no one yet realized that this conversation had already crossed a line it wouldn't return from by the time the show returned from the first break. The atmosphere had shifted. The audience was quieter now, not disengaged, but alert. The kind of silence that comes when people sense they're watching something that might not stay contained much longer. Meghan sat upright. Hands folded neatly on the table, her expression composed but sharpened. Sharon remained relaxed. Shoulders back, gaze steady. Joy Behar adjusted her glasses, already preparing to jump in if necessary. Whoopi watched both women carefully, the way a seasoned moderator watches storm clouds. "All right," Whoopi said, voice calm but firm. "Let's talk about public backlash, because both of you have experienced it very differently." Meghan cut in smoothly. Whoopi paused, then nodded. "Go ahead." Meghan smiled, but there was an edge now. "Some backlash," she said, "is earned. Asterisk, and some is rooted in discomfort with women who refuse to stay in their lanes." Joy nodded cautiously. "That's fair." Sharon turned slightly toward Meghan. "And some backlash," she said evenly, "comes from how you speak to people." Meghan let out a soft laugh, almost indulgent. "So now tone policing is accountability." Sharon didn't rise to it. "No," she replied. "It's consequence." The word landed harder than expected. Meghan tilted her head, studying Sharon as if amused. "I find it interesting," she said, "that women who came up in a very different era love to lecture younger women about consequences." A few people in the audience gasped quietly. Joy jumped in quickly. "Generational differences can be valuable or limiting," Meghan interrupted, "especially when they come with judgment." Sharon's expression didn't change, but her voice firmed slightly. "Experience isn't judgment," she said. "It's context." Meghan leaned back in her chair. "Context can be used to dismiss progress." Sharon met her gaze. "Or to prevent repeating mistakes." The tension sat between them, unmoving. Whoopi raised her hand gently. "Let's keep this productive." Meghan turned to her, nodding. "Of course. I just think we should be honest." She turned back to Sharon. "You've been praised for being outspoken," Meghan continued, "for saying whatever you want. But when I do it, I'm called difficult, divisive, exhausting." Sharon nodded once. "I've been called all of those things," she said, "and worse." Meghan blinked. "Well, you wore it well." Sharon's lips pressed together briefly. "I didn't wear it," she said. "I survived it." That drew a murmur from the audience. Joy leaned forward. "Let's not compare scars." "But that's exactly what's happening," Meghan said. "Some scars are validated. Others are scrutinized." Sharon inhaled slowly. "You talk a lot about scrutiny," she said, "but you also seem to invite it." The room froze. Whoopi shifted in her seat. "Sharon, I'm not attacking," Sharon said calmly. "I'm asking." Meghan's smile hardened. "I don't invite cruelty," she said. "I respond to it." Sharon nodded. "And sometimes," she said, "the response keeps the fire alive." Meghan laughed, sharper now. "So, the solution is silence." "No," Sharon replied. "The solution is restraint." That word again. Restraint. Meghan crossed her arms. "I didn't come here to be told to dim myself," she said coolly. Sharon leaned forward just slightly. "And I didn't come here to pretend that volume equals impact." The audience reacted audibly this time. Joy waved her hands lightly. Okay, let's all take a breath." But Meghan wasn't done. "You know what's frustrating?" Jay said. "Being constantly advised by people who benefited from the very systems they now critique." Sharon's eyes narrowed just a fraction. "And you know what's frustrating?" She replied, "Watching someone tear down every room they enter. then blame the walls. The tension snapped tighter. Whoopi's voice cut in, firm now. All right. We are not doing personal attacks. Meghan looked offended. I'm being honest. Sharon nodded. So am I. The two women locked eyes, not hostile, not explosive, but unyielding. The audience could feel it, the moment where neither was willing to step back. Joy leaned toward Whoopi and whispered, "This is getting bad." Whoopi nodded subtly. Meghan finally spoke again, her voice controlled but cold. "I find it disappointing," she said, "that women still police each other instead of standing in solidarity." Sharon responded without hesitation. Solidarity doesn't mean silence, she said. And it doesn't mean indulgence. That was the moment the hosts realized they were losing control. Because Meghan's posture shifted, and when Meghan Markle stopped smiling entirely, everyone in the room knew this conversation was no longer salvageable. The applause that followed the commercial break was scattered and uncertain. A few people clapped out of reflex. Most simply waited. Meghan sat rigid now, shoulders squared, chin lifted. The playful confidence from earlier was gone, replaced by something sharper, defiant. Irritated, ready. Sharon, on the other hand, looked almost unchanged, calm, present, as if the rising temperature belonged. Entirely to the other side of the table, Whoopi spoke first, slower than usual. "Let's reset," she said. "This is meant to be a conversation." Meghan let out a breath that sounded suspiciously like a scoff. Joy noticed immediately. "Meghan," she said gently, "you were saying you felt misunderstood." "I feel misrepresented," Meghan corrected quickly. "There's a difference." Sharon nodded. "There is," she said. "And sometimes the misrepresentation comes from how we frame ourselves." Meghan turned sharply toward her. "Are you suggesting I'm responsible for how people treat me?" Sharon didn't hesitate. "I'm suggesting we're all responsible for how we treat others." That landed hard. Meghan laughed, short and dismissive. "Of course you'd say that. It's very easy to sound reasonable when you've never had your every word weaponized." Sharon's expression tightened just slightly. "I've had my words cost me my career," she replied calmly. "More than once." Meghan waved a hand. "Let's not pretend that's the same." The audience reacted audibly. Whoopi leaned forward, voice firm. "All right, we're not ranking trauma." Meghan nodded, but her eyes never left Sharon. "I just think it's interesting," she continued. "How women who were once considered controversial suddenly become the gatekeepers of acceptable behavior." Sharon leaned back, folding her hands. "Gatekeeping?" she asked. "Or boundaries?" Meghan's jaw clenched. "You're telling me how I should exist in public?" she said. "How I should speak? How much is too much?" "No," Sharon replied. "I'm telling you what happens when every conversation becomes a confrontation." Joy jumped in quickly. "Let's focus on common ground." "But there isn't any," Meghan snapped. The room froze. Joy blinked. "I'm sorry?" "There isn't any," Meghan repeated, louder now. "Because every time I speak, I'm told to soften, to explain, to justify. And when I don't, I'm labeled difficult." Sharon leaned forward slightly, her tone still controlled. "Being difficult isn't a crime," she said. "But being dismissive is." Meghan stood halfway, then sat back down, catching herself. But the damage was done. "You keep accusing me of tone," she said. "But maybe the problem is you're uncomfortable with being challenged." Sharon met her gaze. "I'm not uncomfortable," she said. "I'm unimpressed." The audience gasped. Whoopi stood up immediately. "Okay, we're going to slow this down." But Meghan was already leaning forward, voice tight. "You don't get to be unimpressed with my life," she said. "You don't get to judge choices you've never had to make." Sharon's voice didn't rise. "I get to respond to what's in front of me," she said. "And right now, what I see is someone who mistakes pushback for persecution." That was it. Meghan stood fully this time, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Joy's hand flew to her mouth. "Meghan, no," Meghan said sharply. "I'm done being lectured." Sharon remained seated, looking up at her. "I'm not lecturing you," she said. "I'm disagreeing with you." Meghan's voice shook, not loud, but furious. "You think you're better than me," she said. "Because you sit there calm and measured and pretend that makes you wiser." Sharon looked at her steadily. "No," she said. "I think I've learned when not to make everything about myself." The audience erupted gasps, murmurs, stunned reactions all at once. Whoopi stepped slightly between them, palms out. "That's enough," she said firmly. Meghan grabbed the edge of the table. "This show claims to support women," she said. "But the moment one refuses to be palatable, you all turn on her." Joy shook her head. "That's not what's happening." "It is," Meghan insisted. "You let her sit there and dismantle me." Sharon finally stood. Not abruptly, not aggressively. She stood like someone ending a conversation. "No one dismantled you," Sharon said quietly. "You did that yourself." The silence that followed was deafening. Meghan stared at her, eyes blazing. "You know what?" she said. "I don't need this." She reached for her microphone, unclipped it with a sharp tug, and dropped it onto the table. The sound echoed across the studio. Joy whispered, "Oh my God." Whoopi turned toward the camera, already preparing to cut. But Meghan was already walking away, and everyone knew there would be no coming back from this. The door didn't slam. That was what surprised everyone. Most Meghan Markle's heels clicked against the studio floor as she walked off set, controlled, rigid, unmistakably angry. No glance back. No final word. Just departure. For a beat, no one spoke. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether to clap, gasp, or stay silent. The cameras lingered on the table where Meghan's microphone lay abandoned. Its wire coiled loosely, like something discarded in frustration. Sharon Osbourne remained standing. Not triumphant, not shaken. Simply still. Whoopi Goldberg exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment settling into her shoulders. She turned toward the camera, professionalism snapping firmly back into place. "All right," she said evenly. "We're going to take a moment." Joy Behar leaned back in her chair, eyes wide. "Well," she muttered, just loud enough to be heard. That escalated. Whoopi shot her a look, not angry, but final. "We invited a conversation," Whoopi said, now addressing the audience directly. "We didn't invite a breakdown." The words were calm but unmistakably decisive. Sharon finally sat back down. She didn't look pleased. She didn't look relieved. She looked finished. Joy turned toward her cautiously. "Sharon, do you want to respond?" Sharon shook her head once. "No," she said. "I think everything that needed to be said was..." The audience murmured. Whoopi nodded slowly, clearly agreeing. "This table," she said, tapping it lightly, "is for discussion, not domination, not dismissal, and not personal attacks." She paused, then added quietly, "When someone feels unheard, they can speak louder, or they can listen harder. Walking away is a choice, but it doesn't make the room wrong." That line landed. The cameras briefly cut to the empty chair Meghan had left behind. It looked smaller now. Joy sighed. "I don't think anyone planned for that." "No," Sharon replied softly, "but I think it was inevitable." The studio fell silent again. Not awkward. Not chaotic. Resolved later that afternoon, clips would flood social media. Headlines would argue over who crossed the line. Comment sections would fracture into camps. Some would say Meghan was provoked. Others would say she provoked herself. But one detail would dominate every replay. Sharon Osbourne never raised her voice. Joy and Whoopi never stopped trying to calm the room. And Meghan Markle was the only one who stood up and left as the show wrapped. Whoopi turned once more to the camera. "We'll be right back," she said, but everyone watching knew that conversation was over, not because it ended loudly, but because one person chose to leave before it could finish. And in television, as in life, the empty chair always tells the loudest story. Some conversations end with applause. Others end with explanations. And some end with a walk-off that says everything words no. Longer can if you enjoy slow-burn confrontations and unfiltered moments like this. Like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications because the next table might be even harder to leave.